today's video, I'm going to be showing you my second Encanto design. Originally, I had done Mirabelle. This time I'm going to be doing Bruno, which was so requested. One thing that's really cool about this design is that there is a green glow that surrounds Bruno as far as the background and then in his eyes. And I used the same glitter mix that I used in Mirabelle's background in Bruno's. I hope you guys love this one as much as I do. In the dark, he really does have that really kind of eerie effect that he does in the movie. If you missed the Mirabelle design, I will put a link to it in the description box below, so check that out, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! To start out our Bruno, we're going to begin just with a little swirly background of some purple, some green, and then some glow-in-the-dark. And if you happen to have a glow-in-the-dark purple and a glow-in-the-dark green, you don't have to worry about adding in that extra glow-in-the-dark element. But if you, like me, don't have a separate one that is glow-in-the-dark for those colors, then you want to add just a clear glow-in-the-dark acrylic swirling through it, which is what I did, which kind of gave it a semi-foggy look, which actually I like too. I'm going to add a little bit of a multifaceted glitter throughout, just not overpowering it, but just a little extra something in there. Encapsulate the nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure it stays nice and strong, and just keep all of those little glitter flakes protected and coated. A lot of times with glitter, if you end up filing it, they just come right off. So whenever you use anything that's a glitter encapsulation, really make sure it is fully covered with a bit of clear acrylic just to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere on you. So now we're going to start sculpting our Bruno. So I have a medium tone tan color acrylic. I'm going to do just the basic shape of his face. Now with any of these characters, like I've done a bunch of different ones, there are more than one way to skin a cat. So a lot of times what I personally do is I start out with a basic shape of the face, and then I like to go through and like to fill in some of the facial features and sort of build from the outside in. That's my personal preference. I have seen so many different artists that are sculpting faces with acrylic start with the nose, which to me seems like a very peculiar route to take, but it works. Obviously, it works really well for them. It is the process that, you know, is how it works for them. So I start with the nose and kind of build out from there. Like I said, more than one way to do absolutely everything. So if that's how it seems like it would work better for you, just give it a try. Or maybe you've tried my method and it just doesn't seem like it pans out for you. Maybe try starting with the nose and building up from there. So as you can see, I added the forehead and I pulled that acrylic down into the shape of his nose. Bruno has a rather large nose, so make sure that you sculpt it with plenty of acrylic just to make it look big. He's got a very prominent nose. I'm going to add a little bit more acrylic to his cheeks. Whenever you're sculpting a character like this, there are points where you can do something or you don't have to, depending on how detailed and how involved you want to be with your design. If you want to keep it a little bit more simple, you could simplify this whole thing, quite a bit, and you could do a lot less detail, a lot less depth to it. Obviously, I'm pro depth and pro detail, and I like to do them, but it's completely up to you. And depending on what sort of facial expression and what moment you want to sculpt Bruno from, I'm going to be giving him kind of a sour, like, little pouty frown, sort of. He's not happy with what he's seeing in his vision. So we're going to give him that kind of a little frown. I'm going to be adding a little bit more to his nose to widen it. And I also sculpted in, you can't hardly see it on the video, unfortunately, but a little bit of a brow wrinkle in his forehead. And so then I'm going to be adding in a little bit of purple. This is like a purpley nude color underneath his eyes for some eye bags, some dark circles. If I had a color that was slightly darker than the one I used, that would have been better, but I didn't on it. Obviously, you got to use what you have. Something like that is not a case where I would necessarily say not to use the other color if you have something that's close. I would use something that, if it's close, like how my tanny purple color is close to the color I was looking for. Maybe not quite as dark as I would have hoped for, but it's easier to color correct with acrylic paint if you're close to the right color than if you're totally off base. So if you have something that's closer, obviously go ahead and use that. I'm going to be adding just a little bit more acrylic to his mouth. I felt like his mouth area didn't have quite enough of a roundedness to it, so I wanted to amplify it a little bit. That original smile that I had carved in with the tip of my brush did give a good base for it though. And one thing to keep in mind with Bruno is because he has a mustache and a goatee, just like a little bit of a stubble thing, you have to make sure you leave plenty of space from his nose to his chin to add in all of those details. To sculpt his eyes, because I do want them to glow, I'm going to lay down a bead of white acrylic, use a medium-sized dotting tool, and just poke a hole into the white acrylic while it is still malleable before it is completely set, but after it's in the liquid state. So you're going to just dip your dotting tool into some white acrylic powder and then press it into the white acrylic. Once that little eyeball has set up and it's where that hole isn't going to move, fill in the cavity that you've created with green acrylic. And then you're going to take a smaller dotting tool and add a little cavity in the middle of the green, and then you're going to grab your black acrylic and you're going to fill in that last cavity with black acrylic. So when you're doing and you're filling in all these different things, your eyeball staying fairly flat. It doesn't have that concave look that an eyeball does. It isn't spherical. So now you have that extra space where you can add that cap to the eyeball to give it that, concave dome shape that an eyeball has with your glow-in-the-dark acrylic, which is what is going to make his eyes glow, which is, like I've said, kind of one of the cool things with this design is that the background glows and his eyes glow, giving it that swirling domed vision chamber that the sand creates for him. After I have that done, I'm going to take a little bit of diluted brown acrylic. I'm going to add some shading around his eyes. There's so many opportunities for extra details and depth on this design that you can do with either acrylic or acrylic paint. I am doing a little bit of both, and you'll see what I mean as far as adding the different shading on. As even his eyebrows would be just fine to do with acrylic paint. You could, if you wanted to, try to do the mustache and the goatee and the stubble with acrylic. Obviously, that is a personal choice. I decided for that it'd be a better route to take with the paint instead of the L&P system. So if you are somebody that is more an acrylic paint person than you are an acrylic person, then even like the eyebrows, the details around the eyes, filling in the nostrils, all of that could be done with basically no difference in the outcome with acrylic paint instead of with acrylic. And every once in a while I say L&P, and I don't know, does everybody know what that means? It's liquid and powder, which basically means the monomer polymer acrylic system, the two-step system. Sometimes I shorten it in my brain to L&P, and I've seen different people refer to it that way, but I don't know if that's very mainstream or not. So I figured I maybe should give a little example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to add a little bit of shading on his lips. Again, I'm not going to worry about the mustache or the goatee or any of that at the moment. I'm going to leave that alone. Essentially, the last thing we have to do on Sir Bruno is add his hair, and he's got kind of a hairdo in this particular pose. Again, he's in that trance state where it's being sort of blown to one side as the sand is swirling around him. So he's going to have not much hair on the one side of his head, which is the side I'm currently working on, and then it's all going to kind of flow off to the side on the other side. So then we're going to be adding that hair on the other side with a lot more volume. I'm also going to be adding in his ear, the little bit of ear that is shown in the middle of his hair. And when you're doing hair like this, you kind of have a choice of color. He has, his hair is a very, very dark brown. I don't have a brown that I think is quite dark enough to really be the right shade. So what a lot of times I'll do is either I'll just sculpt it with the closest color I have, sort of like with his eye bags, or I'll take and I'll double dip a bead of brown and black acrylic and use a swirl of color. And that's a really great option to use, especially if you have somebody, the one that comes to mind, especially when I'm talking about doing that double dipped color combination for hair, is Moana, when I sculpted a Moana nail. And I can put a link to that one in the description box below, as well as the Mirabelle nail that I mentioned in the intro. But that one really did very well with the two colored. It's a little more glamorous. And for somebody like Bruno, I don't know necessarily that glamorous is really what you're going for. So instead of doing that two-toned color, it almost looks like it's got these really metallic highlights in it. Beautiful. But like I said, maybe not appropriate for Bruno because he's not a glamorous person. He lives in the walls. So maybe we are going to not do that. And I didn't. I just used the darker brown, and then you can add some depth to it later on. He also has a few streaks of gray running through his hair that we will add with acrylic paint. So now that we have all of that sculpting under wraps, we're going to start doing all those final details with acrylic paint. I'm going to use some very, very diluted red to amplify his eye bags, as well as add a little bit more color to his lips. And then with some diluted black, I added a little bit of a strand, a little hair strand detail to his eyebrows, and then I'm going to go through and do his mustache and his goatee and the stubble of his beard overall. When you're doing this, do very tiny little dashed lines for the stubble, and try not to do too much at once or go too quick. Kind of take your time with it. And then after you have that done, you can go through and add outlines wherever you feel like you need to, either using black or a dark brown on him. He has a very eerie look, so you really want to make sure that you kind of add this hollow look around his eyes, darkening around them, not outlining them like you would with, say, eyeliner, but more of just like this darkened shadow around his eyes and around the eye bags. Amplify those wrinkles on his forehead, add some black outlining and some depth throughout his hair. You can do that however much or however little you like, especially depending on the shade of acrylic that you had to start with. And then once you have, for the most part, there's not a whole lot left. We're going to be adding those little streaks of a very light gray throughout his hair for where he's starting to gray. He has a very haggard appearance, like he's, well, I mean, like I said a few minutes ago. He lives in the walls. And so we're going to be doing a little bit there. I'm going to darken his pupils just a little bit so they're slightly less foggy looking just from that glow-in-the-dark acrylic. Add a little highlight on his eyeball, and then we're going to be applying some gel sealer over the background. Look at that glitter, you guys. Oh my goodness, it's so pretty. It's one of my absolute favorites. And then after we have that, I'm going to be applying some matte top coat over Mr. Bruno, and that is it. I hope you guys like this design as much as I do. Like I said, I think that glow-in-the-dark really just gives it a whole nother element, especially if you are familiar with the movie. It really just makes it that much better. If you did miss the Mirabelle design, I will put a link to that one in the description box below, so check for that, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!